and there is a place for every sound. So we're going to look at a story about acceptance and then about being like water and how you might have an oceanic mind. So this is a quote from Adrienne Murray Brown. Do you already know that your existence, who and how you are, is in and of itself a contribution to the people and place around you? Not after or because you do some particular thing, but simply the miracle of your life. And you know, it's really wonderful to be reminded at this time when we're thinking about Christmas, for those of us that celebrate it, when we're thinking about gift giving, when we're thinking about Black Friday, which just happened, and that somehow what we buy or the material things in life are what are actually going to make our value. And none of that really matters. What matters is who you are, and that who you are and how you show up, no matter how you show up, is valuable. So I thought this was a really great quote to start with. And then she goes on to say, there is no way to repress pleasure and expect liberation, satisfaction, or joy. Now I want you to think about that. How can you feel free and satisfied and joyful if you're repressing your opportunity to feel good? It just doesn't exist. And so again, I'd like you to think about during this holiday time, what brings you the greatest joy without any of the gift giving or the material things or even the fancy meals or any of that? What brings you joy? And maybe it's just a matter of being with others. I still feel a little bit of feedback. Could you perhaps turn the speaker down just slightly?
I wonder if it's someone's hearing aid, maybe.
It could be a hearing aid. There's just I hear it once in a while. Let's try that. And I'd like you to think about this idea that acceptance is not surrender, it's reframing. You know, when we think about relationships with others, especially family members or even a partner, that we're somehow surrendering when we accept. But if you can look at it from the fact that you're deciding to let go of certain things, reframing how you're looking at it, that then that can change your relationship. Does that make sense? We have a little bit of disturbance in the audience because there constantly is a little bit of feedback for some reason.
I think it's getting better.
Okay, good. Okay, so think about this as in reframing something. And maybe it'll give you another viewpoint on wars and different things going on in the news. When the war in the Ukraine started, the children and the adults would look up when every rocket or airplane passed overhead. Like, you can just imagine what that must have been like. And there was a great fear that everything flying by was a sign that their life was about to end. After a time, they continued to look up whenever a rocket or airplane flew by, not in fear, but rather in gratitude that it was continuing to pass them by. Now, what an interesting shift, right? When they looked at everything from a spiritual lens, even the reminders of war can lead us to a place of gratitude over fear. And you know, this concept really brought me to the idea that people in Israel, for instance, where there are car bombings and things like that all of the time, that how do people go to work every day and not be concerned about, you know, are they going to blow up in the next afternoon or that day or whatever? And the thing is that we have to go on in spite of circumstances, or else life is not being lived to the fullest. And how can we do that? How can we reframe what might be going on right now? And maybe for you it's not war. And so I was reminded of Colonel Sanders. I have a picture of him up there, and his life. And he never stopped believing in his dream. He was 65 when he retired, and he was absolutely broke.
Okay.
So like a pretty disastrous situation. He didn't give up. and used his first security check to travel across the United States to search a business partner for his secret recipe, which was $105 is what he was asking for. He was surviving with little food, living in his car. That time was the hardest time of his life. He was facing rejection after rejection. I don't know how many rejections I could take before I'd give up. But the thing is, if you have no money to feed yourself, something's got to keep you going, right? But giving up wasn't an option for him. He tries repeatedly. Colonel Sanders was rejected 1,009 times before his chicken recipe was accepted. And he also came from a family where his father and mother really believed that you just never gave up. And so he came from that culture, that consciousness anyway. So think about that in terms of perhaps there's something going on in your life. And you've said, you know what? Like, I give up now. But perhaps it isn't time to give up. Perhaps it's not time to totally surrender. Perhaps it's time to reframe it, like I'm sure that Colonel Sanders did, and said after 999 that, well, I've tried it 999 times. I wonder what's going to happen on the 1,000th time. And that's the reframing. So I'd like to look at the Tao and water, and this is the Tao's way of looking at how to live life through struggles and positive situations. So this is a video.
In the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu compares the Tao to water. Water can give life, conform to any container, flow around any obstacle, erode mountains, destroy cities, cleanse, heal, travel to the lowest and highest spots, move effortlessly and efficiently, and transform into ice, water, or vapor, depending on the circumstances. And in one translation of the Tao Te Ching, in chapter 8, Lao Tzu says, quote, "The best of men is like water." In Taoism, this best man is referred to as a sage, and by taking on the qualities of water, the sage comes close to the Tao. I said that water could be described in many ways, but I think it has one chief characteristic. It's formless. And because it's formless, water is adaptable. It can become whatever it needs to suit the situation, in cold turning to ice, in heat to vapor. So the water-like sage must be formless too. But what does it mean to be formless? A formless mind is capable of endless, expansive growth. A child is a great example of formlessness. Its mind is still fresh, unjaded, and unconditioned by the world. Nothing but potential lies in front of it, and it does nothing but learn all day. But as many children grow older, their minds tend to calcify. They become more rigid, and they stop learning. But the water-like sage retains a mind that is formless, unbounded, and constantly learning, lacking rigidity, and capable of responding to any situation. So what causes rigidity in the mind?
So what does cause rigidity in our minds?
Fear of the unknown.
Fear of the unknown. Perhaps even repeating a mistake that we've done in the past. What other people think of us. Fear, really. All of it is fear. So there is a beautiful poem that's written by Noel McGuinness. He's passed away now. He's a CSL minister and a beautiful writer. And this is his poem, and I'll read it to you. Be as water is without friction. Flow around the edges of those within your path. Surround within your ever-moving depths those who come to rest there. Enfold them while never for a moment holding on. Accept whatever distance others are moved within your flow. Be with them gently as far as they allow you, your strength to take them, and fill with your own being the remaining space when they are left behind. When dropping down life's rapids, froth and bubble into fragments if you must, knowing the one of you, now many, will just as many times be one again. And when you've gone as far as you can go, quietly await your next beginning. So how did you get here? Did you froth and bubble? Did you break into pieces? Sometimes I felt like I was broken into a million pieces. And yet somehow this essence, which I like to think of as like water, comes together. You know, think about snowflakes. That's a little bit like falling into pieces, and yet it is that same water. And so if your life is feeling a little upside down, a little broken up, a little can't get a handle on it, know that there's a part of you that is this formless potential that can just come together at any time, and it does. And to just hang in there and have that faith. So it was an interesting story that I read where a mother asked her daughter if she got into college. And she was so afraid to let her mother know that her marks weren't good enough, that she didn't get into college, that she lied. But she moved away anyways, pretended that she had gotten into college and the whole bit, and kept the lie up for a few years, actually, until she was supposed to have graduated and finally had to tell the truth. And I think about some of the times that I have lied to protect myself from the reaction of someone or looking bad or whatever it was. And it's really hard to backtrack from a lie. It's harder, actually, to backtrack from a lie than it is to tell the truth right at the get-go. And you know, why do I fit it into this particular talk? Because it's our opportunity to look at why we do and think anything that we do. Because we are beautiful, unique creations. And who you are and what you have just done is a gift for you and a gift for everybody around you, even if you think that it's not the best thing. And to just own up to it and have a conversation about it. And rather than to dig a deeper hole and go deeper into whatever it is that you're afraid of, why not just shine some light on it? So lies continue to multiply and get out of hand. And I mean, she'll never learn how to resolve conflict, because conflict is a given, right? There is always going to be some level of conflict somewhere. And if we can learn to resolve conflict before it even happens, then we're really truly a sage. And that's what Tao calls people who are doing their best to live deliberately. And so I'd say you're all sages most of the time. So how does a sage handle conflict? Well, rather than constructing delusions to protect yourself from conflict, become like the ocean, oceanic. And it's a metaphor for the God in you. And the idea is that you can drop some poison, let's say, into a glass of water. Well, it's pretty poisonous still. But you can drop a drop of poison into the ocean and it just gets diluted. And God is that ocean. So if you allow spirit that is the greater part of you to handle the conflict, ask for help from that spirit within you, that things transform and they become less of a problem. I had a conversation over the last couple of months with a couple of individuals who were really struggling with different things, and the common denominator was that they thought that they could do it all by themselves. They were a bit like that small 8-ounce glass of water with the problem they were having, rather than allowing the greater part of who they am to come in and help. That somehow that help was them surrendering, them being weak, them being less than. And yet, actually, the opposite is true. That when you open up to the wisdom that is the greater part of you, that there is just so much wonderful that can come from that. It can seem scary because it is the unknown. So you can use its formless to grow to the size of an ocean. Now, if you drop conflict into the ocean, what happens? Well, you can have waves crashing on one shore and it's totally calm somewhere else. It's diluted. And an oceanic mind truly resolves a conflict because it can take all conflicts into itself and dilute them. It isn't affected or touched by conflict. So as we move into this time where sometimes it can be pretty conflicting being around family members that you only sit with twice a year, once a year, some of the events that go on, how can you be oceanic at this time? And even if a catastrophe was dropped into your mind, as your mind grows and expands, all conflicts are eventually diluted. I find most of the time when I'm dealing with something, it's pretty much a couple of hours at the most before I kind of get settled. It used to be at times weeks of just being in this kind of frenzied state. So you can train your mind, I'm here to tell you. And I'm a tough nut to crack, so I'm a good example for you. The oceanic mind is pure potentiality, not because it chooses to be, but because no matter what it encounters, it retains its infinite possibility and its resilience. And so no matter what you've experienced, where you've been, what you're going through right now, there is so much more available to you. And you can transform it sometimes in an instant. You are a miracle. So why not act like it? Don't waste it. So we looked at acceptance. We looked at being like water and having an oceanic mind. Spirituality is a constant, consistent attempt to feel the presence of God in everything and in everyone. So would you say this with me, for me, as me? There is a place for every color in the palette. I choose to feel the presence of God in everything and everyone.